I'm gonna act serious. We're talking about Salesforce development today. If y'all don't know me for some reason, I'm post way too much on LinkedIn, and I just enjoy talking about Salesforce development types of stuff. So, yeah, I'm very passionate about it. I've been in sales like development for, I think probably Salesforce development for 10 years. I've been writing code for probably like 13 to 15 now. And I've just found it interesting as I've gone through my career, and I like sharing about it because Salesforce and code have really basically they've changed my life, right? It's the only career that I've ever been in, and I've been able to be very successful with it. Like you name it, I've had six-figure salaries, I've got the certifications, I've gone to speaking, I've gone to conferences because of all of these skill sets that I've been able to get, right? So it's an amazing skill set to learn, and I encourage a lot of you to really dive into it and making sure that you're bringing it in as part of your your learning path and the things that you want to focus on, especially for like the near to long term. Just in case you've seen different trends and things like that, right? Developers still have very high job placement rates and opportunities, generally more opportunities out there than some of the other types of roles, right? And not to downplay any of the other roles, but this is a more technical skill. It is a skill that takes more time and is harder to get. So it's just more sought after and there's more opportunities for it, right? But yeah, there's other things about me. I've got a YouTube channel, a degree in information technology, right? So I went to school to write code and write programs and things like that. But one of the things that I found out, especially going through that time and getting some of my first jobs, is you don't really need to have a formal education to learn this stuff and to understand it. There has been an amazing rise of people that are basically they're learning self-paced through um, lots of different learning resources like this conversation that we're having here, reading books, building out your own applications, and just working up to it in general, right? And it's so the barrier to entry is super low for you to just install on your computer and start writing some code and eventually learning about it. So I've seen many different students that I've had, like having no experience with code, really start to understand it and be able to deploy and deliver code inside of their orgs. So do me a favor, just really quickly, either in the chat, just type out like where you're at in your development journey. If you're just a beginner, you've been writing code for a while, right? You're trying like what are the next things that you want to know about development, and sharing where you're currently at with that, right? I think that'll help kind of set the stage as well. So as y'all are doing that, I'm going to talk about what we're going to go over, right? So we're talking about the basics of programming. We're going to go over triggers and SQL, right? Just some fundamental things, and also talking about like customer interfaces, right? So how to do debugging. I'll also sprinkle in some actual code that we'll review after we go through some of like the just terminology and stuff like that. But I really want to demystify some elements of code, showing an IDE and just the process of writing some code and understanding how it's going to actually work. So really quickly, there's just that general terminology that we want to go through so that we're all speaking the same language, right? And there's a lot of jargon when you start talking about coding and programming. So on a fundamental level, on a base level, we want to make sure that we're talking about a lot of the same things. So you'll hear words like variables, which are the overall like containers with a label that hold information, right? And you'll see a lot of that on like TV and stuff like that, where it's like integer, my age or my name equals this, and lots of equal signs and stuff like that, right? So all of that is just the base level of it, and it's really about how we can start to build on top of these fundamental building blocks like variables and expressions and statements so that we can build more complex applications, right? So really quickly, we've got this variable for integer, my name. The integer piece on it is the type of values that we can store inside it. So for this variable that's named my age, we can store integers, which are, I'll let you all guess in the chat, what are integers, and why are we specifically saying it's an integer? What values we can hold inside of an integer? Then we have an expression, right? So this is a piece of code where it produces some sort of value. So my age plus 1, right? So integers, yes, we see a lot of people in the chat saying that, this is for numbers, right? But they are for whole numbers because these cannot hold decimal points. So just a key differentiator there, and you'll start picking those up as you write more code and work with other languages. So then we move on to expressions, right? Something that yields a value, and then a full-on code statement, right? So we have our integer, we're doing an assignment with the equal sign, and then the expression that we have over here, 1 plus, or my age plus 1, right? So we're changing this variable, or we are adding variables together and then setting them into a new one. So some of the things that you kind of see in the first section there are the operators. So these are just different symbols that can perform an action like math. In terms of this plus sign, right? Those adding two things together. We've also got minus sign, double ampersand, and double, or the pipes, or double pipes, right? So these all have different elements that go along with it. And then there's an aspect of how you can get your code to be readable, visible, translate easily human understandable data through it. And a lot of that is done through comments. So if you write good comments, and you can see how they're done here, either with double forward slash and the forward slash star, star, then forward slash again. This is called a block comment, right? And once again, we're just learning about these different terminologies for when we really dive into code, or when you start writing some stuff out yourself, you're reading articles, you're asking things like ChatGPT to explain stuff, you'll be on the same level of it. So in a lot of different coding languages, there are different styles of writing your variables or setting up, typing out your syntax, right? The code that you write in there. And for Salesforce development, especially with things like Apex and object-oriented languages, you use a thing called camel case, which is just a way of structuring your variable names, right? Everything is lowercase until you get to the first main word in it. So my is all lowercase until I get to the next word, which is age, and then I am capitalizing that A in there. So it helps with your readability, helps with your understanding of processes for your code. Then we get to dot notation. So this is when you're using some sort of value that is related, that is related, some sort of property that is inside of your functions, inside of your actions that you can perform. So in this case, the string contains, right? This is a way of checking to see if a value has a string in here. And then similar thing, like we've got functions, which is just one way of calling additional sets of code. So, and all of this is okay if you're like, that kind of makes sense. It's good to be introduced to these terminologies because you'll see them multiple times as you start learning how to code. So really quickly, code runs from top to bottom, right? So it's going to start up here, start processing down as it goes through. And then when you get to a function like print my age, or a function like print my age, it will jump back to where that function is being called, right? So if I'm over here, it's running from top to bottom, it gets to this value, or this line of code, the statement here, it's going to run this. And then we're going to move on to the next set. And we finally get back to here again, and it's going to run this code one more time. And this is kind of what the output looks like. We're just adding some values together and printing out some values for this. But really, this is to demonstrate that when you have a function, or oftentimes in Apex, it's called a method as well. Those are interchangeable words, at least for Apex and Salesforce development. this function is a reusable piece of code that it can be used in many different places over and over again. So over here, we're calling it here and it's printing out the age, and then we're calling it at the bottom and we're printing out the age. But we can see that the data that we were using has actually changed as it started processing. Oh, and one thing to call out, right? These system.debugs, I mean, they're my best friend. They're not everybody's best friend, but they are my best friend in terms of understanding what your code is doing. I have a very interesting saying for my students. It's like seeing is believing, right? So if I can see what my code is outputting on a line by line basis, then I know what's actually happening inside of the code. So when you're a beginner, I advocate for doing lots of system debugs, right? This is how you print out from your Salesforce org into your actual logs that you can see. And we'll see that in a second. So real quick, we talked about variables. It's how you can hold different sets of information. You have to do a variable declaration. So you're defining what values you're allowed to put inside of a specific variable. And then we have our variable assignment, right? So we're putting a value inside of our code over here. So I'm gonna do a little break or a scene shift, I guess, and I'm actually going to open up Visual Studio Code. So this is where you write all of your code. Well, I won't say all. Sometimes I'm a little wishy-washy. Like I don't want to say things in absolutes and like somebody clip it and be like, "Oh, Warren said this and da 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 da." But this is where you need to be aiming, striving to write your code in as a Salesforce developer, right? So it is an IDE, an integrated development environment, and it is a place for you to write your code that is directly hooked up to your Salesforce instance. So there's lots of tutorials. I've made tutorials. Everybody has made tutorials on how to kind of get to this point of actually creating or setting up your Visual Studio Code instance and creating a project, right? And you'll kind of land on this empty-ish project, right? I didn't want to go through all of that setup for you, but I guess check with me in the end. I've got like 101 setup videos and stuff like that if you would like to see those. But really, what I want to get into is just playing around with Visual Studio Code and being able to interact with some of the data that we are creating variables and kind of messing around with some of those things so that we're not potentially afraid of one, this console, because there's potentially a lot on it, but two, we can actually try things out inside of our org. So really quickly, down here at the bottom, if you've got a Salesforce project set up correctly, it's going to ask you to either select an existing one or to authenticate. So I'm going to click down here. I could log into my org and it would already hook things up for me, but I've got a ton already set up. So I'm just going to select one of those in there. And then now, one of the easiest places to start when you've got a Salesforce project set up like this is in your scripts folder, right? Scripts, Apex, and then Hello Apex. And this is basically like you're using your developer console inside of Salesforce and the Apex anonymous code. And some of you might be like, the heck is developer console? It is just another place where you can write code on the Salesforce platform. It's very rudimentary in terms of its capabilities, but for a long time, that was all we really had to use to be successful on writing code on the Salesforce platform. So when you open up this Hello Apex, it should come with every new project that gets created. You're greeted with some just default code in here. And it's totally fine to run this code just to see what happens and what executes on it. And we can see here, it's like doing a couple things, and we'll break down all of those. But if we hit this execute button at the top here, we'll see a whole bunch of stuff start like printing out and coming back for us. And these are your debug logs. So it's basically all of the logs that get Salesforce generates for you as your code is running. And it tells you a lot about what's going on in your org. It tells you the code that it just ran, your variable assignments, and a few other things and it's okay if we haven't touched all of these things before. And even gives you your governor limits, right? Some limits that are around when you run your code, which is very handy and very important when you're writing more complex code. So I'm gonna make some more space over here and just kind of break down this piece that, these couple pieces that we have here. So we see there's comments at the top. It's using that double forward slash to create the comments. And these are seen as your human readable text, right? Like this, unless you're trained, right? You see this for the first time, you're like, I have no idea what's going on here. But if you have some human readable text in front of it, right? So we're doing our double slash and we're going to say assigns a variable called temp with your name, right? So you are able to put this text in without our code or our org yelling at us. I like to call it barfing at us, right? If I remove this and tried to execute just this regular text, we can see that we're getting unexpected token error, line 9, which is all potentially very cryptic, right? But if we put our comments in, then we know that this is just a regular sentence. Then we have our variable declaration, like we were talking about before. The variable name is called temp, and we have assigned we are saying that only string values can go inside of our variable temp. And there's a long list of all the different types of variables that exist in Salesforce. But a string is just a set of characters, right? So we can assign or put in like our regular text inside of this variable, which only allows us to put strings inside of it. One thing you'll notice here is that we're putting the small single quotes surrounding this, and that's how we tell the computer, that's how we tell Salesforce and Apex that this is a set of strings, right? These are characters that we want to put in a string variable, versus if we like removed it, it's going to treat this as like plain text, or it's actually going to try to find a variable named Warren Walters, which doesn't work. But if we want it all together, then we're going to use these single quotes. So now from here, it's going to assign from right to left. So it's going to take these values and put it into the temp var. And then we can use this temp var wherever we want in the rest of our code. We couldn't use it above, right? Because then as soon as we do that, it's going to start try to execute it. It's saying illegal forward reference, right? And that basically means we're trying to use something before it's actually declared, or before it's actually set up inside of our code. So once we create this variable, we're allowed to use it anywhere afterwards, and we can use it multiple times if we want. I'm just going to copy this and repeat it a bunch of times, and I'm going to run this execute method. Scroll all the way down to the bottom, and we can see that code is running multiple times down here. So what these system debugs do is they print out in this debug log that's in here. And like I was mentioning, seeing is believing, right? Now I know exactly what is inside of my temp variable, now that I can see it in the debug logs. And we can do some more assignments, right? So calling my variable, I'm going to say, I'm going to put Anita in here, right? So I've now assigned that variable to Anita. And then I can also do some additional manipulation, right? Using that dot operator. And VS Code is smart enough to say, give me the options that exist for this variable. And I can do things like capitalize, which should capitalize everything. We'll take a look at that in a minute to see if everything actually works. And so I'm going to execute this again, scroll all the way down to the bottom, and I've got my value of Warren coming through the first time, Anita coming through the second time, and then the third time we're not seeing anything, but we know we use this. So what's happening here is it's changing the value and giving it back into a new object. So I'll just call this string new name, right? Making sure to use my camel case. And then I'm going to update it here. And did I get an error? Let me run it again. Oh, why is it not updating? Anita temp var. My name is Anita. Let's try that with test just to make sure it's being set. So it is being set. Am I forgetting how to use capitalize? Is it capitalize all? Oh, you know what it is? To uppercase. See, all of this stuff, I generally don't remember all of them or how to do all of all the things that exist inside of Apex. And that's where documentation comes in handy to remember how to change all of these things. So capitalize was probably just doing the first letter. And then there is a method, right? A function that we can call on any string variable called to uppercase. And this should set everything to to uppercase, but capitalizing it. So just some quick things that you need to know how they're like how they work, how code kind of processes and does their assignments and things like that. This is just a general sense of that. And there are other variable types. We've got integers, and normally called something like int, and integers can only have numbers. There's decimal, also an important one. So these normally hold currency, right? So $123.32. It's normally what you want to use a decimal for. There's also date time, and loads of other ones, right? I don't know if we have time to go through all of them, but we can always peek at the documentation to find those. So I mentioned documentation, right? The one kind of Bible or thing that you want to follow when you are working as a Salesforce developer is the Salesforce Developer Guide, right? So I just down here typed in Salesforce Apex, and then normally there is either this Apex Developer Guide, which will start walking you through, right, lots of different things that exist on the Salesforce platform and how they're done in Apex. So if you wanted to learn about the data types, this goes over them in brief detail, right? There's integers, doubles, longs, date time, strings, IDs, and then you can dive into them even deeper when you click on this primitive data types that's going on, that exist in here. They'll give you examples and things like that to look through. So this is something that you want to get very familiar with. Even if you don't understand everything that's going on in here, it's good to be able to navigate and walk through, at least try to understand some of the things that exist so you can have more confident conversations around this. All right, enough code for now. Let's continue on. We've talked about some of these data types already, right? A Boolean data type is a checkbox. Date and date time, these are how you hold your date values. Integers and decimals, where you're holding your numbers. And remember that decimals can have decimal places, whereas integers are only whole numbers. Strings, that's how we're holding text. And collections and objects. So these are a little more complex. A collection is just a group of things. If you've worked with flows before, right, you've seen those collection elements. Similar setup if you have multiple like objects, multiple numbers that you want to keep together, then you'd use a collection. And then an object is similar to an object inside of Salesforce. It is where you can hold even more complex data, but also fields that represent an individual object. So imagine you have a car object, and a car can have the number of wheels, the number of windows, what color it is. If the blinkers are working, all of those things can be held inside of a custom object, and that can also translate into code as well. So let's go into more detail with the operators, right? We've seen some of these. Some of them are self-explanatory, right? Addition, subtraction, division, and then multiplication, right? Division and multiplication, we may or may not have seen based on, just these symbols, if you remember from school and stuff like that. But they are they are ways of doing arithmetic operations inside of our code. So let's take a look at that over here in our code. I'm just going to clear all of this out, right? And then we want to, let's set an integer of age, right? And I'm going to put an integer for my current age and setting that value in, right? So I'm just using the direct numbers in here. And then maybe next year rolls around and I need to add to my current age. So I'm going to say current age equals, right? So I'm assigning some sort of values on the right to my values over here. I'm going to say age, use a plus sign, +1, right? And if I run this right now, we might be able to pick through and see what's going on down here. Like we can see some code and see some of these things over here, but it's not easy to tell. It's not easy to see what the current age value is. So that's why I recommend those system debugs, right? Seeing is believing with these. I'm going to print out my current age. So now when I look at this again, we can see down here, there's this debug log with my current age, and it works really well. You can add in this little filter thing over here, and we can see the latest logs that came through down at the bottom. So now we're seeing that that arithmetic operation has gone off. We've added a value to it, and we can add a ton more, right? We can add whatever we want, just stringing those arithmetic operations together to yield some new value as it's going through. So here's the value. I'm not gonna, I'm just gonna assume that it's correct, not counting all of those up, but we're just changing those values as we're going along. So similar thing, if we wanted to, change our current age equals to age times 5, right? Just changing that. So that's how we would do multiplication. Current age is age divided by that number. Why not? And then current age equals, and then I think the only one we're missing is subtraction. Right? So this is how you can do the different actions. I don't know if this is, let's see what happens when we do this. -92 is what all of this yields, right? But the more important piece is, right, is that these are how you use the arithmetic operations, right? We've got multiplication, division, and subtraction in here. Right, so we're just using these, assigning them to different values, and seeing how they interact with the code that we're working with. Then we're going to jump into the equality operators. So this is a way of knowing if, checking if a value equals something, right? If a value is true or false with code. Right, so we're checking if values are equal or not equal to each other, and it's the same thing of like, is this an apple? And you have one apple in one hand and an orange in another hand. It's you're comparing those two to see if they are equal to each other or not. So when we're writing code, the equality operator to check if something is equal to it or equal to something else. We use double equal signs because if we remember when we use single equal sign, it is it's an assignment variable or an assignment operation, where when you use double equal sign, it's an equality operation. We're saying, are these two things equal? There is greater than, less than, so these are normally used in math. And then double ampersand, some folks are used to this for formula fields and flows. And then the double pipes, this is an or statement, right? So one or the other needs to be true for this to go off. And then we'll go into flow control, and we'll take a look at some of those equality operations, those comparison operations together. So in here, right, we've got our flow control, and really all that means is You're just deciding which path to go down, which branch to go down. And the comparison operators and flow controls go hand in hand because when you use flow control, you're basically asking a question, and using the equality operators is how you ask that question. Is 5 equal to 7? Well, no, then we want to go somewhere else. So here's an example of flow control written out in plain English, right? It's if I wake up at 7:30 a.m., then I wanna do this, right? So it's an if-then setup. Otherwise, if this is not true, we want to jump down into the next section, the next piece. So otherwise, and we have another condition in here as well. Otherwise, I wake up at 8:30, and if I wake up at 8:30, then I'm going to work from home, right? And then finally, right, if none of these are true, then I'm going to jump into the finally block over here where it's the weekend and I'm going to play video games for that day. So very simple example, but this really can help illustrate how things get broken down when you're actually writing code. It's really just you have your decision element that you need to do some sort of expression, some sort of a comparison to understand if it's true or false. If it's true, you want to do the action. If it's false, then you want to do something else. So that's that branching logic that we look at. So let's jump back into VS Code, and I'm going to clear all of that stuff out and just create our first if statements for Apex, right? And these are fairly common, like a base level a base level thing that you need to know, fundamental thing you need to know on building out more complex operations, right? So we can build that same exact example. So integer current time, and actually we've used integer before, so let's do a decimal for the current time, and let's say it's 7:30, right? 7.25, or no, 7:50, right? So this yields us, let's say it's 7:30 in 7:30 a.m., right? Because 0.5, half of 60 is 30. All right, so we can take this value and start running calculations based on it. All right, so we can say if we're going to use open and close parentheses here. So this is how we denote where we want to have our condition inside of it. Something inside of here needs to yield a true or false response, right? A Boolean response. And I normally treat these as asking a question, right? So what is the question we're going to ask? We're going to say, is our current time equal to 7:30? Right? So this is the question that we are asking. If that is true, we want to say that we're going to get ready, system debug, going into the office. Right? So we can visually see these, right? That this is 7:30 and our current time matches up to that. If we execute this, what we're expecting to see down here is going into the office. Let me actually clear these out and run it again. Right? We're seeing going into the office. Do this. Going into the office over here. And if I wanted to have additional logic, right, I can do an else if current time equals, using that double equal sign again. I feel like I said it was maybe 8:30, so 8.5. Then we want to do something else, right? System debug, working from home. And just closing that off there, executing this. And we can see that we're still only getting the going into the office. So we're not even seeing this value over here. But if we change this to be 8.5, what our code's going to do is it's going to run through and check this first. this is going to yield false, and then it's going to check this value over here. Now, let me highlight it. There we go. And now it's printing out working from home. So it's checking this first. This is yielding false. This question that we're asking, is our current time equal to 7.5? This is not true. So then it's going to go down into the next section, which it asks the question, is our current time 8:30, 8.5? And this yields true. So it's going to drop down into this. And then the other piece that you can have with if statements are a final else block. And this is basically everything. If we don't meet a condition above, then we're going to do the block at the end. Playing video games. I'm not even going to check if it's the weekend. I'm just going to go straight into playing video games. And I can put like a 10 over here. And we can see that playing video games is starting to come through, right? So we're checking this one. This is false. We're checking this one is false. So we have our fallback, our rollback, whatever you want to call it, right? This is the thing that is always going to execute when we have our code, when we have our if statements that don't meet any other conditions, right? So and this is super helpful for setting up and having fallbacks, fail safes for our code. Some other things you might be seeing here for the first time is just these curly braces. So what these are is basically a code block. Everything inside of here, your code will run. So you can have multiple lines of code, right? System, or we can create a new object. Let's do string thing to do. You see I'm using camel case thing to do. I'm gonna say, or yeah, let's just say work. And then I'm gonna do something kind of fun. Add in that thing to do at the end of this. All right, so all of the code that's inside of this code block will execute, right? It will go off. And you can have multiple lines. You can have huge, insane amount of lines of code inside of your code block, and only that code will run if it enters, right? If it meets this correct criteria, it'll enter this and run that specific code. And you can have code blocks that are really short or code blocks that are really long. And the only other thing I think I'll show on this, if I do 7.5, let's do 7. And I'm just going to change this to be, if our current time is less than 7.5, then we want to run this code over here. So let's execute this. And going into the office is printed out, and we can see that I've added work at the end of it. This probably makes more to work. But you can see that we're able to, one, concatenate, right? This is called concatenating a string, so adding two values together. But also the key thing is you can have multiple lines of code inside of one code block, right? So only the things that are inside of here will run, and it's not even worrying about the ones on the outside. Final thing with this is that once your if statement's complete, the code after it will run. So I'll say going home for the day. Right, so all of this if statement code will run over here. It'll decide which one it needs to do, and then once this finishes, it will run the code at the end, right? So we can see going into the office and then going home for the day. So it ran whatever code it could find here, and then it also ran this code after that top to bottom setup that I was mentioning earlier. So very fundamental stuff. Things that you need to start building out more complex applications. And this is really like the start of your development journey as you're starting to dive down into different areas. So we have loops, which I won't dive into too much for this live session because it just ends up starting to get more complex, but loops are also one of those basic structures that is very important for you to do repeatable code, right? To iterate through your code. So if you ever find yourself copy and pasting or copy and pasting the same line or repeating the same line, you should consider using a loop, which continues through the process until you're done with all of the items that you want to iterate through. There are multiple types of loops as well. There's a traditional for loop, a for each loop, a while loop, and a do while loop. I don't know if I remember any other ones, but really for the purposes of being a beginner, it's totally okay to start with mastering one type, which we generally recommend the traditional for loop or maybe even a for each loop. And then you can kind of move from there. Now we've talked about methods and functions a little bit, but methods really just take that entire section of code that you have and package it up so that it can be reused in other areas or of your organization, right? So this becomes super handy if I've made some sort of repeatable code or process in my organization. Let's say that we have this code here where we have some sort of time that we can enter in, and it'll tell us what we should be doing, right? I can put this in what's called a method so that it can be used in multiple places. And a method looks similar to something like this. For like if you've seen them before, it's public, static, void, find what I should be doing. Open and close, parens, and then we're going to wrap this entire thing in like curly braces. So this is generally what a method looks like. This is potentially not a very good one, but there's a few like keywords, which is okay if you don't know what they all do now. But this is the structure of it, right? Just for background knowledge, whenever you see void in a method, that means it's it's not giving you anything back. It's doing its own processing completely inside of here. And then these open and close parentheses, this is where you can feed your method data, right? So if I wanted to use this, actually put this inside of here too. If I wanted to use this, I would come up here and call my method like this, right? So this is now a repeatable section of code, a modular section of code that I can reuse in different places. I don't know if it'll work in this setup. I'm going to try to execute it. Oh, it looks like it did work. Let me clear this out. Use execute, and we can see that it's printing out more stuff. And now if I really wanted to, I could print it out a bunch of times, and we can see it's popping a ton of stuff. And then the last thing, or another thing with this, I'll show you how to input data into a method. So with this parameter over here, this is what this is called. So we're saying that whenever we're using this method that we have, this repeatable piece of code, we can send in the current time, and then it will take that and process the data down. So if we say 7 for the first one, 8.5 for the second one, and I'll do null for the third one. If anybody has any guesses on what null is, I'm open to hear it. I will execute this code, and we see that, the first one, the first run that it does, it's printing out going to the office to work, and then we're going home. Second run, we're working from home, and then we're going home, I guess. Stop working. And then the third run, right, we're playing video games, and hopefully I'm playing them at home, but y'all can kind of see the point of using a method here where it's reusable. We're able to enter in values and data. And then with this null piece in here, this just means the absence of a value, right? So we're not sending any values through. It's empty, and we're just sending that empty value through. So now we're going to jump into manipulating Salesforce data, right? So all the stuff that we were just talking about is very, um, it's to set up doing some sort of manipulation, right? Or it's a base level business logic, but now we need to be able to edit our Salesforce data, or a way of getting Salesforce data so that we can edit it. So there's a few key things, right? We need to get S objects, which are just the Salesforce custom objects or standard objects that you work with, and we can access those fields inside of them. There's database manipulation language. So this is how you change all of the values inside of your Apex code or inside of your org, right? You can insert records, update records, delete them. You're using DML, so database manipulation language, and you use queries to get values out of your Salesforce instance to really be able to change them up and retrieve those values. So you can see some examples of like simple queries in here and simple DML, and of course it can get more complex from there. But it's how you can work with your actual data inside of your org. So let's take a look at this. Every DML or every SOCL statement, right? So every query that you do, it requires the select and from. And with that select and from, you need to enter in the fields that you want. These are the API names that are related to your Salesforce, the Salesforce object that you're working with. And then we need to, the from clause is the table or is the object that you're working with. So in this instance, we're doing from contact, and it's going to return a table. It's going to return values that we find for it. There is also a where clause, so this adds filtering on top of our SOCL, our queries. So this is only returning things that have, returning contacts that have the first name of Mark, right? So if we scroll back really quickly, right? Tony is in here, and then we go through, and now the marks are the only ones that are showing up and being processed. Then we have something a little more complex. It is on our triggers, and triggers are used to take action on top of our Salesforce data that are our Salesforce elements that we're using inside of our org. You can treat these for naming sense or for understanding sense similar to the process of like flow record triggers, or even process builders, if you know about process builders and workflow rules, right? They are waiting for an action to happen inside of your org, and then they will automatically run your code in this instance, so not your flows or anything like that. So there are a few different types of triggers that you can have. You can have your before trigger and your after trigger. Before triggers run before your records have actually saved and been committed into the Salesforce database. So there is a time when you press that save button inside of your Salesforce UI, there's a little bit of time in between it saving where processing happens. And it'll stop you, or you can do different actions in your before triggers. Your after triggers, they are after everything has been saved into your database, but they're not fully committed, right? They're not like stamped in stone just yet. And this is all like database terminology, and that's fine for you to like, just be aware of it for the first time here. But as you dive deeper into writing your Apex code, writing triggers and stuff like that, you will start to pick out the differences and like why some of these things are needed. The only other thing here is just the order of execution, right? This is the path that when you press the save button in your Salesforce org in the UI, there's a certain number of actions that will happen. And I think Salesforce Ben has a really big write-up on it, and there's a bunch of write-ups on the Salesforce order of execution, and it's basically just all of the actions, the steps that get taken before a record is actually saved into the database, right? And you can take some guesses as to some of those things that happen in the line, but as you can imagine, right, your flows when you save a record, your flows go off, your validation rules go off. There might be like emails that need to be sent or post processing. Your triggers need to run. So all of those things have a specific order that they process under. So that's the order of execution and really, an important piece of understanding, just writing more complex Salesforce logic. So I think the next pieces get into, trigger context and trigger variables and that kind of stuff. I think it's at least I want to leave some time to open up for questions for folks just either on development in general, and we can pop through to talk about any kind of anything development related in detail. So I'm gonna pause here, but you all should have access to like these slides and all of that stuff too. I think I handed it over to y'all, or you can message me and I'll send them out to you as well as we look through them. But triggers is really once you're starting to work on and building out custom logic inside of Salesforce. So this is really where you want to build up to and get into as you're starting out, right? You want to be able to do logic inside of your triggers for whatever your business needs to get done. So I'm going to pause there, open it up for questions and thoughts and comments. I'm open to talk about, developer ecosystem and Salesforce development jobs and all of that stuff. So it's really on you all to kind of drive the conversation for the last couple minutes that I have you. And I see a hand raised. Who is that? Juan?
Hey Warren.
Hey.
So I have a question. I just don't know how much it applies to the entire audience. So I'll ask it and feel free to like table it if needed.
Yeah.
But I'm Salesforce dev. I've been a dev for about 10 years. So I'm PD2 certified. And I was thinking about this because I'm trying to find resources on advancing as a dev. So even when I look at your cloud, I think it's Cloud Code Academy, I
Mm-hmm.
see the path to get into development, and then I see the path for architecture. But it's like if I'm not trying to become an architect, as I think of as a suite, right? Like there is dev, senior dev, staff, principal, and then there's architecture. So if you want a diagram, go into architecture. But as a Salesforce developer, it's like I can go diagram, but that's not what I prefer to do. It's like trying to build projects. So it's like how do I become more senior in that regard? If I'm trying to like make my own applications, have better designs here, it seems very like shotgun. Even when I look at
Yeah.
Trailhead, it's like you have JavaScript, you have MuleSoft, you have other certifications, but none of it is like how do you go from yeah, you're mid, but to senior, to staff, to principal, etc.
Yeah, great question. And I have definitely seen and heard very similar sentiments from the Salesforce ecosystem in general, where there's not a very good path from moving really beyond that mid level, right? There's uh, in other disciplines, there's a more clear, okay, you should start learning this type of things. You should start building out these types of applications. Here are some of the harder things that you should start to work on. In Salesforce, there's definitely a lack of those resources. So the best thing I can tell you, at least for right now, is to work on harder projects, right? If you're stagnant, it's a kind of a real thing to say, right? If you're stagnating at your current company, you might need to leave or to look for those hard opportunities, just so that you're building out more complex things. And then also looking for different resources in those types of like senior level principal developers and start learning from them. But in the Salesforce ecosystem, it's not as easy as saying like, okay, well, you just need to learn queuables and finalizer and you're done. You kind of need to practice it a little bit too, to be able to say that you're getting to that level. But short answer is there's not like a one-stop shop for more senior level types of resources, which there probably should be. And then a long answer is you have to go out and figure out how you're going to learn those things since it's not something that's like put in front of you.
Okay. I guess it's like describing the second scenario that you said there. It's like I am seeing things that are challenging enough, and I do see people who are more senior. It's just the answer just always seems to be just do more and just get more experience versus like again using another example. If you were handed a difficult project and you're trying to work on things, and then it seems like you're having a problem scaling, but you never learned DSA, then they tell you go learn DSA, right? Like in here, it's like, okay, I'm building out Salesforce solutions and we're having problems because we are hitting scaling. And then, well, I have the problem in front of me. And then maybe we can get somebody that's harder, but then there isn't like, here's a path to go learn how to do these things properly, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm exploring like just software engineering path stuff because I can't find Salesforce specific stuff.
Yeah. And I think that's, if we're talking about going outside of or a good place to, that's generally what I did, right? You start getting a transcending just Salesforce development at a certain point and you become just a software engineer. You can write in any language and
Okay.
do whatever you want from there. So you'll have to pick up different disciplines that have these things already, like let's say built out for them, or some of them already solved for them. And I don't think my bookshelf is set up, but like reading tons of books always helps. Watching YouTube videos, all of those things. It is hard. I like learning by trial by fire, right? Being thrown into that project, and it's like, okay, we're stuck. We've got to figure out our data structures now, and figure out how to scale this thing properly. But there is a point to where you should probably, like, if you're doing it the correct way, you can probably learn this stuff as you're going along, right? In the correct order. So there's not a good Salesforce resource to do that right now. There definitely isn't. And you're just pulling things from other disciplines at this point.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Because I'm kind of going out of Salesforce, and I was just wondering if that's basically the path I have left. And it sounds like it is. I have to basically leave Salesforce to keep growing in that regard.
Yeah, and you can apply those techniques to your Salesforce projects, but it's a matter of like, okay, JavaScript's been around for like, I don't know how long, 20 years and whatever, right? You can learn all the things in there and then apply it inside of Salesforce.
Right. Thank you.
Cool. But yeah, definitely like stay in touch. I would love to have more of this type of conversation too, because I want, that's one of my things. I want to solve that problem for the Salesforce ecosystem as well, but it just takes time. Awesome. Any other questions, comments? It can be as complex or as simple as you want.
Yeah, hi, Varun. So, just to add to the previous discussion, so what I understand is you're trying to say if I have to get onto that, predefined career track, like he said, uh, then ideally I have to have some transferable skill sets from Salesforce into maybe general software development. That is the only way, right? Is that what you're trying to say?
Do I want to say that's the only way? As you write more code, you will be able to write code in any language. It will automatically be transferable for you, right? As soon, the basics of Apex that I just showed you all, assigning those variables and doing some manipulation and all of that, that is generally the same in every single language. Like you can write code in Java, you can write code in JavaScript, whatever it is. So at a certain point, you will be able to code in any language that you want because you've built up just this baseline understanding of how they work, right? But there is a certain point to where Salesforce doesn't have resources ready to go for, let's say, like senior level people with 10, 15, 20 years of experience. Are we at 20 years of experience in Salesforce? I think we technically are. It's people with a lot of experience writing code where just the Salesforce documentation, the know-how is not ready to go. We don't have that path laid out for us exactly. It's some of the things that I want to build out and create, but it takes time to do that, right? It takes people like me and all of you to build all of those things out. So in other disciplines like Java, JavaScript, Python, some of those things are more popular than Apex and Salesforce development. So they're already kind of built out and fleshed out for you.
Right. So my personal situation is like it has been a while. I started coding in Salesforce. However, I personally feel that I'm not advancing that much, and I need to do a lot of there's a scope to learn a lot still now, and yeah, like once I go back to work. Probably companies would, given my kind of experience, I have more than 5-6 years of experience, like solid experience, I'll say. But still, I think I lack in a lot of areas. And when I want to, go for an interview, the company will ask me to sit for an SD2 type of position, but I still think that I need to do a lot of more learning to reach there. So yeah, there's kind of this thing, like I'm also suffering from this. So
One thing I'll say, and it may just be my personality, a little bit in here is, I'm always trying to push the boundaries of where I should be and what I should be doing. Because you're saying you have 5 years of experience, but you don't think you're ready for that like next position that you're going for. And I would argue you should try to go for it and see if you can actually do it, right? The only way you'll know if you're ready for it is to actually fail at that position, right? So don't count yourself out before you even start going, jumping into or to that new job, right? So there's always going to be new things to learn. There's always going to be things to that you just don't know because the programming as a discipline is gymongous. So don't ever count yourself out, even for brand new beginners in a development role that you see. I would apply for it. See how the interview goes. If you fail that interview, then you have things to practice and grow and learn upon. But I wouldn't count yourself out for some of those more senior roles, just to see how you do and how you progress from it.
also, I have one more question. With the advent and potential of Agent Force, how cautious should we be as far as developer roles are concerned? I know Agent Force will definitely help us to do a lot of basic tasks as a developer, so that we can focus more on problem solving or maybe debugging. But overall, what is your suggestion? Like, where should we see ourselves in the scenario in the next 2-3 years, maybe as Salesforce developers?
2-3 years, unsure. 1 year from now, I think that we should, as devs, 100% be embracing some of these productivity tools that are being given to us. That being said, right, big caveat, big asterisk on top of that, make sure that you understand the fundamentals of your development so that you can know what like these AI tools are generating, right? Because it's garbage in, garbage out. If it's been trained on my code, and my code is really bad. So you want to make sure that you're able to read the code, understand what it's doing, and not just blindly accepting it. And that will start, as we look to 2-3 years in the future, the developers that can read through like either AI generated code, use those tools as a productivity increaser, versus the devs that are just like clicking yes to everything and not knowing what's going on. Those folks will start, I'll say, fading away, or it'll be very easy to tell who actually understands what's being produced and how to use it, right? So I think that's where we're going to get to is a point where everybody's going to be using it, but who is using it effectively? Who's using it properly?
Right, right. And
And
I
I
think,
think,
yeah, go on.
well, one more thing. I know we're running close on time. I see Ramya's hand up, so let's end with that question, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, hi, Varun. I'm at the beginner in the developing journey. Currently, I'm part of Radwoman Part 1 course. And what would you suggest after completing this 10 weeks of learning? How can I continue my learning in developing?
So the biggest thing after you finish it is to continue to write code, or write, read, watch, whatever you're doing. You don't want to stagnate, and that everything that you learn kind of gets forgotten, and then you feel like you have to start from the beginning, which you won't really have to do. So there's a few things I recommend, right? I think Red Women, you're already on Trailhead, so knocking out those Trailhead badges. There are really great sites like Camp Apex and ApexSandbox.io and lightningchallenges.com. that give you practice problems to start writing code and staying up to date with your code. So from there, it's really good to think about like what type of opportunities you're looking for, right? So if you have transferable skills, maybe you come from a certain background and you're applying for a specific job, read that job description and see how that translates to the things that you know right now, and then start building out projects that align with like your dream job, for example. So all of those things kind of compound together into you just want to find a way of keep learning, right? You can DM me, but and I'll give you the list of those sites as well.
Sure.
But it's really about staying in practice and then building out projects so that you can talk confidently in your interviews or wherever you're at. I don't know if you're currently working at a company that has Salesforce or not, but you want to go down that path. That platform developer one exam is there as well. It's something that you can attempt to tackle, but it's more important to get practical skills and building up like a portfolio, a showcase, like actual skills for development, than to just have PD1 and say that you've got it. It's infinitely better to be able to properly write an if statement, properly write a for loop, build out a small application, than to just say you have, PD1. So I'll wrap with all that.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for staying on late to answer those questions. Appreciate that. Some good ones. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day and a great weekend.
Cool. Thanks.